Dr. Samantha Rathnayake, I would like to say a few words on this again. So, Dr. Samantha Rathnayake is having more than 20 years of wide experience in diverse sectors, including the Food and Agriculture Organization of UN and the ICICI Bank India, the Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing, and the Sri Lanka Foundation. He is serving as the management consultant and faculty member at the Postgraduate Institute of Management of University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. He has been involved as a member of the panel of judges to evaluate the Entrepreneur of the Year competitions organized by Federation of Chamber of Commerce and Industry Sri Lanka since 2016. And he is serving as the head of the technical committee of the Regional Management Conference organized by Chartered Professional Managers of Sri Lanka in association with AMDISA. And he was the director of studies of the Sri Lanka Institute of Training and Development during 2012 and 14. At the Chartered Institute of Personal Management, he has contributed as the co-chair of Great Human Resource Practices and also the chairman of GHR Practices in 2018. And he served as the technical committee for the 2021 World HR Congress. Dr. Rathnayake is the reviewer of the National Science Foundation of Sri Lanka. So I once again welcome Dr. Samantha Rathnayake. Please try to take the initiation and present from your side on the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Reddy. You can see my screen?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, many thanks to Professor Narayan Reddy for initiating this and AIMS. And thank you, Professor Charles Hood, for setting the tone. And so let me take within my 15 to 20 minutes initial remarks. I will take this futurism and prediction under the focus of improving estimates and long-range forecasts. So, so predominantly, I am coming from postgraduate education background, but extensively I have worked in, say, education sector in terms of undergraduates as well as professional education and in the private sector in diverse organizations. So with that, may I set my remarks under two main lines, that is a philosophical view to this and of course practices and applications. Since Professor Charles has set the background from decision, some other linear, non-linear thinking line and some mega trends and so on, of course we can harmonize and synergize these views at the latter stage with the questions. So ladies and gentlemen, now let me start with the philosophical view to set the tone. So if we look at in a very simple way about this topic, since Professor Charles also said this is a very elusive area. So in that light, so if you look at futurism and prediction, so we need to start in a very simple way. Look, we are dealing with abstract and concrete concepts. That is what we do as academics, as professionals in our relevant fronts. So we have to deal with all these concepts, wide variety of concepts. In that light, we need to ask a question when it comes to topics like futurism and prediction, how we should look at this. Okay, where we should stand, where should we stand? And then of course, what is our approach? So if I reiterate this abstract and concrete, because a very elusive, big, hairy kind of concepts, and the business and the reality and the practices do demand some concrete, clear applications. So that is what the tone Professor Narayan Reddy also very clearly articulated at the inception. Look, pre-COVID and the post-COVID, where we should stand. With that, if we look at this, how do we explore the scientific concepts? If I get bit of a bulky theory here, of course we do induce. So we are doing induction, or we call induction, no, inductive reasoning. I'm just reading it out. is the process of reasoning in which the premises of an argument support the conclusion but do not ensure it. Of course, we have so many inductions about this world, these multiple concepts. And if we do some deduction, then deduction is an argument whose premises, if true, provide conclusive evidence for the truth of its conclusion. So if it is in line, yes, we deduct. If it is not, we come out with a view. In that sense, since this is happening in a Ames context, may I say that yes, in theoretically in the research front, we talk about this induction deduction, but sometimes as professionals, we do abduction also. So that is a Charles Sanders Peirce view coming into the picture. It's a type of inference that is frequently employed in some form or the other. So may I reiterate, both in everyday in scientific reasoning. So ladies and gentlemen, this pre-COVID, post-COVID, in this context or in other contexts, we used to say a lot of, uh, I would say, abductions. So abductions are all guess, all just views, opinions. So as professionals, where we should stand, how we are going to bring this closer prediction into our day-to-day life, and how we are going to bring our scientific reasoning into a more closer, the realistic scenario rather than giving some kind of a view only, opinion only. So with that, the challenge is what? Among many theories and concepts and opinions and forecasts and so on, how do we get the clarity? So, in that sense, in my opening philosophical line, ladies and gentlemen, let me take three scholars only. Let's take Karl Popper. What he has said, look, the science concepts, these concepts and theories and formats have by nature the ability, it should be able to falsify. So don't worry, if you have a science, if you are following scientific rule, it should be able to falsify. So in that sense, I think one should not misunderstand. Karl Popper very clearly said, other than Marxism and the astrology, all the other all the other concepts should be able to falsify. But he says, look, astrology never can be falsified because there is a connection, there is another proof, there is another factor coming up. Anyway, our discussion is not about that. So if we go to Thomas Kuhn, so this even the academics also very loosely sometimes use his term paradigm shift. So we might think that we are now shifting the paradigms. But Thomas Kuhn in his 1962 book, The Structure of the Scientific Revolutions, clearly articulated paradigms like significant patterns like Galileo virtually challenge Isaac Newton. Excuse, after 250 years, Einstein said, look, sorry, Mr. Newton, it's this. And that is keep on changing. That kind of a paradigm shift we are talking about. But otherwise, not just moving from like Coke to Pepsi or Pepsi to Coke kind of a scenario. So, but let me highlight this gentleman also, this one of the same Karl Popper Vienna Circle philosophers, Paul Feyerabend, against method. Now, I think Professor Charles also highlighted this linear thinking and non-linear thinking, very important, because when it comes to predictions and these estimates, we have a tendency of looking this linear manner, but the scientific method has the flow in that sense. But our discussion is not on that. So having said that, may I ask a question? Is our philosophical view in this in line with the futurism and predictions are in line? Are we clear about that? So with that, ladies and gentlemen, may I invite you to get it to my the second biggest part. That's the main area, practices and applications. Thanks, Dr. Professor Wood. You have highlighted some of the aspects, so I'm going to get it to some other aspects. So he also has used this term. So, shall we ask a question in this COVID-19 scenario, in this pandemic scenario, excuse? Is it a failure in our preparedness for future, or that creating foresight for institutional future? Where do we stand? Are we adequately contemplating about that? So let's explore that. In that light, we know foresight say sequentially one can say hindsight to insight to foresight. So we have assumptions on one hand, so multiple assumptions. Then of course you have multiple possibilities for the future. So foresight is the bridging part. That is where the center. So if we put this into a more scientific format, one can say if we collate all these foresight exercises of future related predictions, where we can say framing, scanning, forecasting, visioning, planning and acting, like that there are changes of multiple practices, but predominantly these are the key activities. But today our focus is future and forecasting. So in that sense, general forecasting happens from a basic practice point of view. Of course, we do identify driving forces. Then we look at what are the possible critical uncertainties. As Professor Wood also said, that how to develop these possible scenarios, and then of course action platform. So from that point of view, what is our challenge? That is the question that I'm going to raise. Now, whether our pre-COVID, post-COVID predictions right or wrong, even if you look at month on month, if you look at our predictions at multiple contexts are sometimes not in line whatsoever. But now we as professionals, we as like academics and other uh, uh, the thinking line practices, what is our challenge? We can't just challenge the method. So we should be able to build a story, because while we are dealing with these abstract concepts, our task is to what? Build it and tell it in a concrete manner. So whether it's a business, whether it's an educational institute, whether it's a country, it's a political story, whether it's a marketing story, business case, we should be able to build a story, tell a story. It is not just beginning, mid, and the conclusion. No, it's about how validating, how we are operationalizing a given scenario into a context. I think that is where this the gus and the gut feeling, the decision biasness. So professor also reminded that multiple biasness coming up, but in that sense we should be able to build a story. But in that light, so may I highlight few of emerging jargons in this scenario planning, because now at this juncture many companies are doing scenarios. So one upcoming term which is happening now, which is practicing now still at early stage, they call strange making. So that planning for future prediction means moving from familiar to strange versus strange to familiar. So that's the scenario. So are we moving from familiar to strange scenario, which is now experiencing from a business point of view? Are we going to create a strange scenario and make it familiar? That is why this transition and transformation coming up. So in that light, transition design, I think it's a engineering ground. By using this artificial intelligence, 3D printing and other practices are heavily used this. So thanks Professor Wood by bringing those slides also, because it's a transition design which we are planning. In addition to that, this whole jargon of foresight is cold now. These are all pads and taglines called science of surprise. Are we engaging in that in the sphere? So with that, another way of basic practice, I would not use it as a story, but from a consultant's point of view, one can use how this connection between future and today can be done. So three words coming up, that is, one is called sensing. So sense your pattern, because foresight is fundamentally happening generally three ways. That is, one is prognosis, where we look at what is the past scenario and we are going to predict the future. The other one is where we look at the trends, some patterns. We look at trends and see the future. And of course, third one is a scenario planning. So when it comes to future forecasting, it is not scenario plan first. It is about prognosis. Then, of course, the patterns, the trends, and then we look at that. Either way, from an organizational point of view, project point of view, business point of view, you can get sense to mess. So that is why you're going to shake up, surface the blind spots. So getting these dark points, all these uncertainties, unthinkable areas. Then of course we can look at, we can create that new reality, new form. You can call any name, but since these concepts are by and large more abstract, one has to carefully build the story. Otherwise, it will nullify. People will not believe on it, that on that. So with that, in my next 2 to 3 minutes, may I ask that what is our current scenario in our education institutes? Are we having this adequate discussions on long, short term, mid term, or long term? Or that have we learned lessons from our current practices? And are we clearly looking at what aspects we should look at? So in that sense, since Professor Reddy asked me about to bring some economic and other examples, so I just take 2 3 slides to tell from Sri Lanka point of view the trends. If I extract some data from April, so ADB, Asian Development Bank, predicted the world global economy losses as US 2 to 4.1 trillion kind of a range. From a Sri Lanka economy point of view, in April, ADB predicts that it's a 2.2. So if you look at Moody's group of company ICRA prediction, they say that in a different way, call expects the Sri Lankan economy to face a recession of magnitude 1.9 in 2020, and having U shape and getting into a recovery next year. So if you look at some other parallel predictions, it gives us some interesting thinking line the same period, how ADB to ICRA to IMF. IMF says, okay, economy contract by 0.5%. World Bank says economy may contract between 0.5% to 3% contraction. So, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the main bank, the main body, says, regulatory body says, look, it is expected to grow like about 1.5%. So you would see that the predictions are based on a relevant organizational, the agenda line, criteria line, they are the expectation line, intentional line. So having said that, if I just show a current one, if you look at this, the lockdown period from India Sri Lanka point of view, I'm just extracting one bulky data slide here from EDB, Export Development Board, where you would see April month is anyway comparatively 2019-20. Anyway, the figure is low, but by May it has picked up. You would see the apparel garments has picked up. Value-added tea and bulk tea exports picked up. Total merchandise has picked up in May to April. So we are now in July. So that means if you look at even the relevant European market, USA, India, Middle East, the relevant markets also, the numbers are increasing. So what I want to say that the estimates to be looked at in the context, in the real scenarios. So if you look at upcoming the 2020, other than the current COVID, because Sri Lanka is having now less than 200 under the surveillance, around 150 people only in the hospitals, only 11 deaths and less than 2,200 numbers. So apparently most of things are happening. This BIMSTEC, the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technique and Cooperation, the next summit is going to happen in Sri Lanka in September. So this has except I think Afghanistan, Pakistan, and yeah, one Maldives. The Myanmar and Thailand are there in this 1.5 billion people, 22% global population category, and it predicts. I would like to highlight the last one. The South Asian Economic Focus had estimated that regional growth in South Asia will fall between 1.8 to 2.8. So that's the range predictions coming up. And so with that, I want to tell you that while we are in the lockdown, I would like to show my own initiative with another body, which is in the SARC region, called Contingency Intelligence and Response Agency, acronym called CIRA, which is a disaster response mechanism in SARC countries, bringing scientific research, international cooperation, and private sector resources together in support of the governments, with the support of SARC Development Fund, universities, leading chambers are partner in this. At least now we are planning. This is at the early stage. A lot of groundwork has been done. So we are now getting ready for any possible other future scenario. So this is a major initiative. I think we can work in this initiative in a big way in months to come. So with that, may I ask my final question? Why do our practices and applications in predictions tend to fail? So, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of the philosophy to practice, the point is that we tend to absorb scenarios in a very elusive manner. Sometimes our discussions are more abstract, so we are not going to bridge this the concrete nature of story building in our relevant endeavors. So because of that, as professionals, our credibility is always challenging. I think we can explore in that light. So Professor, exactly I have taken 20 minutes. So dear past, thanks for all the lessons. Dear future, I am ready. Thank you. Thank you, Professor.